Hello, this is Maya Andreasen, and we're back in a rigging session. This one is going to be the spine, the advanced spine. We already have the legs done, and we have the legs mostly done. We actually have not done the knee controls here, but I'm going to hold off on that. And you can actually watch that in another lesson. So we're just going to start on the spine. So we're giving our character an advanced spine twist, which gives us more freedom when animating the character. So the first thing we want to do is create a curve that will give our spine flexibility. Now, we could just use the spline IK that comes in Maya. If we go into rigging and we go under skeleton, there's a create IK spline handle. But that has always had some issues, especially with the twist. So we're essentially going to create it from scratch and then apply the IK handle, but we're not going to auto create the curve, if that makes sense. All right. So first we want to create our curve. So I'm actually going to go into, let's do front view for now. Let's look at that. Okay, let's go to side view. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to go to side view and we're going to try backing up and zooming in. All right. So we want our spine to basically start around the hip, okay, and then end at the neck. So we're going to go to create curve tool, okay, and we want it to be a CV curve, and we're going to go to the options box and make sure it's one linear. Now by default, if I were to reset the tool, it would be at 3 cubic, but we want it at 1 linear. We don't want a curvy curve, a curve that curves. We want just kind of a straight line. All right, so I'm going to start around here, okay, and I'm going to press X. I'm actually going to end it here. Now, this character's neck is a little bit higher up, and we can always move this manually so it lines up better with the neck, but this is how we're going to do it for right now. We're going to hit enter when we're done. All right, let's go to perspective view. And we want to go into component view. So the keyboard shortcut for that is F8. Now it's F8 if you are using a desktop. It's function F8 if you're using a laptop. All right, so we've gone into component mode. We're going to be moving the curve only in the Z-axis. All right, and the first thing we want to do is we want to line this up perfectly with the thigh bones. And hopefully you all can see this well. Let's make our the visibility of our model so that it is invisible. Now it looks like it's pretty well lined up, but we just want to make sure. So I'm going to press V. And when you press V, you'll see up here on the top that the little magnet with the dot on it is blue. And you'll also see that the manipulator now has a circle at its center. When I let go, it has a square, and this magnet up here is deselected. It's no longer blue. So V. Now the other cool thing is that we can move in direction. So I'm just going to be moving in the direction of the y-axis. And it looks like this is lined up. So we could actually move this down and do this, and look at that. It pops up perfectly and is perfectly lined up with the hips, because we're going to be having, let's hit F, we are going to be having a joint at that point. All right. So the next thing we want to do is we want to move the top point so it is better lined up with the neck. I'm going to go back into the right side view, hit W, and we're only moving in the Y. And I think that's basically where the neck starts. All right, so this is going to be just part 1 of this. All right. We are going to rename this curve. In order to rename the curve, we need to hit F8 again. We need to go back into object mode. And we're going to name it CSPL. So that's for curve spline underscore spine 01. So the CSPL is the prefix. And it's for the spine. All right. So the next thing that we are going to do is we want to rebuild the curve in order to align joints. So with the curve selected, and I'm actually going to hit V so we no longer see the model again. With the curve selected, I'm going to go to Display NURBS CVs. So we go to Display NURBS CVs. And what that does is that's going to show us the control vertices on the actual curve. We are going to rebuild this curve now. So I'm going to have to go into Modeling, Curves, Rebuild, Options box. I'm going to edit reset settings just to make sure. I'm going to set my degree to 1 linear. All right. And then I'm just going to hit apply. And when I do that, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points on our curve. Those points are going to have corresponding joints to them. So every point will have a joint. So we'll have 5 joints in our spine. All right. Now we want to create a joint, orient it, and then duplicate it to create the rest of our joints. So we're going to create a joint. I'm going to go to my create joint option on my shelf. You can also go to rigging, skeleton, create joint. Before I go any further, let's save. I'm going to go save scene as. And we're going to save this as spine 01. So this is my red faction spine version 01, and then I'll increase the versions as I go along. Okay, so now that we've saved it, if it crashes, if Maya crashes on us, it won't be the end of the world. All right, so we're going to create a joint and press down the X key to snap to grid, and it will be oriented to the world. So let's click this and hit X and then hit enter. So we've now created a joint and it's now oriented to the world. We're going to snap it to the bottom CV on our spine curve now. And in order to do that, we're going to press V as in victory, and we're just going to grab the center of the manipulator and snap it up to that bottom point right there. Easy peasy. You need to continue to hit V as you're snapping though. All right, we are going to turn on this joint's local rotation axis. So that, remember, that's LRA on our shelf, or you can go to display, transform display, local rotation axis if you don't have it on your shelf. All right, once we have our local rotation axis turned on, we are going to go to our attribute editor. And under joint orient, so this is joint and this is joint orient. So joint is in this center section here. We're going to put in the following. We're going to change joint orient X to -90. And joint orient Z, as in zebra, to +90. And then you will see that the X-axis is pointing up. Isn't that great? And then we're going to rename our joint BN. BN stands for bind. So B as in boy, N as in Nancy, or you could spell out bind. You could have bind for all your prefixes, so you could have BIND. But I'm going to do B as in boy, N as in Nancy, underscore, 1 underscore, SP. SP stands for spine. You can write out spine if you want. I am not. NA01. So that's what we're going to name it. And then we are going to Control D to duplicate it, and then snap it to its corresponding points. And then we will rename it. So Control D, press W, and press V to snap. Control D, press down V, keep it pressed to snap it up. Control D, press down V. All right, we're snapping, and oops. Let's save our file. I don't know what I just did, but okay. Control D, and we're snapping it up. And so we should have 5 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so we do. All right, so we no longer need our CVs being displayed, so I'm selecting my curve, and I'm going to go to Display, NURBS, CVs, and that will turn off the curves of my display. Now we need to rename this guy, these guys. So we're going to start with A. That's going to stay the same. This next one will be B01, C01, D01, and E01. All right. So now that we've named all of these joints, if you want to turn off the local rotation axes right now, you can. You would just select all the joints and hit LRA. We're going to parent these to one another. So we're going to start with the top joint. And the reason we're starting with this top joint, this is really the bottom of the chain. So our first joint is at the hip and it's A. We want all of these joints to be parented to A. And we're going to start with the highest up here, E. That's going to be the bottom child. And we're going to shift select the D joint and hit P as in parent to parent. Then we're going to select the D joint, shift select the C joint, hit P on the keyboard to parent. Then we will select C and select B. If you're not comfortable with the keyboard shortcuts, you can go to Edit, Parent. And lastly, we will select B, the B joint, and then the A joint, and hit P to parent. All right, so now that we have done that, we can select all the joints. We are going to select hierarchy. So that's on the shelf, it's the HIER here. Or you can go to select hierarchy. That also works. And we're going to change our radius of our joint. So I'm going to go to the channels box over here. I don't want to change all the joint sizes throughout the entire file, just these. And I'm going to go to the radius here in the channels box and change it to 0.3. So they're a lot smaller. And then I'm going to save. All right, so now that I've saved it, I'm going to save it as version 2. And then we're going to start adding flexibility to our spine. So with my spine chain selected, I basically went in and you saw that it went from white to green. So here I just selected the spine A joint, and none of the other spine joints are selected now. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to duplicate the chain, which is Control D. I'm then going to select the hierarchy, and let me just open this up so you can see everything. The hierarchy of this new chain, excuse me, and I'm going to make it 0.5. So it's going to be slightly bigger. Now I also need to change the name. In order to change the name, all we have to do is select this first joint here, and we're going to go to Modify, Search and Replace Names. Now this is great, and I like to add it to my shelf, which I will. So we are going to search for B as in boy, N as in Nancy, underscore, so BN. And we're going to replace with J&T for joint and DRV for driver underscore. And we're going to replace it. We're also going to change the A 02 to 01, which is good. So now all of these are renamed, and it was fairly painless. We now need to connect the Spline AK solver to this duplicate chain. So this is what we're going to do, and we're going to have to zoom in a little bit also to see things. We're going to go to Skeleton, create IK Spline Handle Tool, which we looked at before. We're going into the options box, and we're going to make sure to reset the tool. And then we're going to uncheck everything except for Root on Curve. Okay, so we unchecked everything except Root on Curve. And then what we're going to do is connect by selecting the root of the driver chain. So that's this guy. And see, we have our little marker here, which means we're in the tool. And then we're going to select the top joint of the driver chain. So let's go all the way to top. And then, and you can see them being selected in the outliner. And then we're going to select our curve. Now that's a little tricky. We got to find the curve. I think we can. There we go. Right. Oh, did we do it? Yes, we did. There it is. So there's our IK handle. If it hadn't worked, we wouldn't see the IK handle there. So I can close this up. We're going to rename the IK handle. So it's going to be SP for spine, IK for IK. Well, actually spline, SP for spline, underscore spine 01. And actually, I'm going to add a SPL here for spline, or SPL. No, that looks crazy. Yeah, I think this is good. SPIK. Yeah, SPIK underscore spine 01. All right, and I'm going to name the effector too, so it's going to be EFF underscore spine 01. We never see these effectors, but whenever you create any kind of IK handle, an effector is created, and we're going to do that right now so that it doesn't get confusing later on down the road. All right, so we want to select the root joint of the driver chain, so that's this big one right here, okay? And we're going to press Control D again to duplicate it. In the outliner, we want to unparent it. We want to basically unparent everything from it. So we're going to unparent the duplicate joint driver A. So let's do this. And we're going to unparent the duplicate joint driver E. And then all of these in between, we can delete. So we just need the bottom, well, the top and the bottom. All right, and now we need to change the sides because it's very confusing. So I'm going to change this to 0.7. And that looks pretty good. By the way, you can always make some of these other chains invisible if this is confusing. So you can select the original bind chain and you can do H to hide. And that's going to hide it. You can always hit H again to bring it back. Okay, so if things get confusing, remember you can always do that. All right, we want to rename these two joints. They're going to be controls. So the A1 is going to be joint control. So we're going to change DRV to CTRL, and it is the control for the hip. All right, and then the one in E, that's going to be the CTRL for the chest. Chest 01. All right. Well, we've gotten pretty far. In the next video, we're going to bind the curve and joints together.